Silence can be power, or it can be fear disguised as discipline. From the outside it looks the same. You stop talking, stop explaining, stop announcing, but one version is you building your future, and the other version is you delaying it. So in this episode, I'm not selling you a vibe. I'm giving you a system. Move quietly, but build real proof. Proof you can measure in your body, your money, your skill, your focus, your self-respect. Because silence without evidence is just absence, and absence doesn't change a life. And if you've been telling yourself you're laying low, while a quiet part of you knows you're stuck, I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to make it clean, to take the confusion out of it. Because the moment you understand what silence actually is, you stop using it as a hiding place and you start using it as a weapon. So let's define it correctly. Because most people get this wrong from the start, and then they wonder why nothing changes. Silence is a strategy, not a mood. It's not mystery. It's not isolation. It's not disappearing and calling it growth. Silence is simply reducing unnecessary talk so your energy goes into execution. That's the foundation. If your energy is constantly leaking into conversations, updates and explanations, you'll feel busy and still stay the same. And the worst part is you can convince yourself you're progressing because you're thinking about it all day. But thinking is not proof. Most people leak their best fuel in what I call the announcement phase. They talk about the plan, defend the plan, explain the plan, maybe even argue about the plan, and that creates a quick emotional reward. You feel like the kind of person who's changing. People nod. People encourage you, and your brain quietly collects that reward as if the work already happened. Then, when it's time to do the hard part, when the day is long, when you're tired, when motivation drops, your mind has less reason to push through discomfort because it already got the payment. This is why people can speak beautifully about discipline and still live the same week over and over. Silence fixes that because it delays the reward. It forces the reward to come after the work. It makes you earn your confidence instead of borrowing it from attention. And yes, it feels uncomfortable at first. Not because it's wrong, but because you're removing a cheap comfort, external validation, and replacing it with something real, private follow-through. So what does silence as a strategy look like in your day-to-day life? It looks like cutting off the 3 biggest sources of noise that steal your momentum. The first is performative updates, broadcasting what you're going to do before you've done it. It's not that sharing is always bad. It's that early goals are fragile. They're like a small flame. Too many opinions, too many questions, too much expectation, and that flame goes out. Silence is you shielding the flame until it becomes a fire that doesn't need protection. The second is unnecessary explaining, especially to people who don't have authority over your life. You don't owe a full defense of your sleep schedule. You don't owe a debate about why you're training. You don't owe a long story about why you're focused. Every time you over-explain, you invite negotiation, and negotiation is how standards collapse. Calm people don't argue for their boundaries. They live them. The third is internal noise, the endless commentary in your own head, the little speeches, the fantasy version of the future that feels good but demands nothing today. Silence means less mental theater and more physical follow-through. Not because thinking is bad, but because too much thinking becomes a substitute for doing. And this is where we tie it back to the title. If you want to move in silence and build real proof, silence has to produce evidence. Silence is the container. Proof is the content. Proof is the receipts you can't fake. So here's a practical way to apply point 1 immediately without turning your life into a dramatic project. For the next 7 days, adopt one simple rule. When you feel the urge to talk about your goal, convert that urge into action. If you feel like telling someone you're getting serious about fitness, do 10 minutes of movement instead. If you feel like explaining how you're changing your life, open your notes and do your proof ritual instead. If you feel like posting about grinding, sit down and produce 20 minutes of real output. Let the urge to speak become the trigger to build. Because when you do that, something changes inside you. Your confidence becomes quiet. Your focus becomes protected. Your life stops being a conversation and starts becoming a fact. And here's the question I want you to answer before we move on, because it exposes the exact place you've been leaking momentum. Where have you been using words to compensate for a lack of proof? Which part of your life has the best speeches, but the weakest receipts? The second point is where we draw a hard line, because this is the place most people quietly lose an entire year without realizing it. The trap isn't noise. The trap is the kind of silence that feels mature, but produces nothing. The kind of silence that looks like self-control from the outside, but inside, it's just fear disguised as patience. And the reason this is so dangerous is that it's comfortable. It doesn't create conflict. It doesn't risk embarrassment. It gives you a story you can live with. I'm laying low. I'm protecting my peace. I'm waiting for the right time. And meanwhile, your life stays exactly the same, but now you have a respectful label for it. So point 2 is about catching quiet avoidance before it becomes your identity. Here's what quiet avoidance looks like in real life. It's when you're always preparing but never producing. You watch the videos, you save the posts, you research the plan, you buy the notebook, you build the playlist, you clean your room, you set up the app. You tell yourself you're being strategic, but there's one missing ingredient: output, something finished, something measurable, something that costs you a little discomfort and leaves evidence behind. And what makes this even more painful is that preparation can feel productive. Your brain loves it because it's low risk. There's no chance of failure in planning. There's no rejection in researching. There's no fatigue in imagining. You can spend hours getting ready and feel like you moved forward because mentally you did move forward. But reality doesn't care about mental movement. Reality rewards what you do, not what you intend. Seneca had a way of saying this without sugarcoating it. He warned that we don't just waste time, we lose it, and most of it is stolen by postponement, not by disaster, not by tragedy, by delay, by later, by soon, by the gentle lie that you'll start when you feel more ready than you feel today. And that's the exact lie quiet avoidance feeds on. It whispers that waiting is wisdom, when really it's just fear trying to stay comfortable. So how do you tell the difference between strategic silence and silent avoidance? You don't judge it by your feelings. You judge it by one thing: proof per week. Let me make this painfully simple. If a week passes and there is no measurable proof, no completed sessions, no output, no numbers moved, no project advanced, no skill practiced, then whatever you call it, it isn't progress. It might be rest. It might be recovery. It might be necessary, but it's not building. And if you keep calling it building, you start living in a delusion that feels safe while your life quietly shrinks. Now, I'm not saying you need to be extreme. I'm not saying you need to become a machine. I'm saying you need an honest test that protects you from yourself. Because the mind is talented at storytelling. The mind will find language that makes stagnation feel noble. But proof is brutally honest. Proof has no personality. Proof is either there or it isn't. Here are the 3 most common masks quiet avoidance wears, and I want you to recognize them in your own life with zero shame, just clarity. The first mask is, I'm waiting for the perfect system. You keep searching for the routine, the hack, the ideal schedule, the perfect time of day. But the truth is, systems don't create momentum. Momentum creates systems. The routine becomes clear after you start, not before. If you're still waiting for the perfect plan, that's not strategy. That's procrastination with good manners. The second mask is, I'm protecting my energy. Sometimes That's true. Sometimes you do need rest. But if protecting your energy means you never spend it on the thing that matters most, then what are you protecting it for? Energy is meant to be invested. If you keep saving it forever, you're not wise, you're just stuck. The third mask is, I'm healing. And again, sometimes that's real. But healing that never turns into action becomes a permanent waiting room. Healing is not avoiding responsibility. Healing is preparing yourself to carry responsibility without breaking, and the test is the same. Are you doing one small thing that moves your life forward while you heal, or are you using healing as a reason to stay safe? Now let's make the fix practical, because this point can't just be a warning. You need a move you can make today. The fix is simple. Replace preparation with one piece of weekly proof. 1, not 10. One piece of proof that would make you respect yourself. If your arena is fitness, pick one measurable standard for this week. 3 workouts completed, or 5 walks, or a certain number of steps daily, something you can track without debating. If your arena is money, pick one proof standard, a fixed amount saved, a debt payment made, expenses tracked for 7 days. If your arena is skill, pick one proof standard, one finished output, 1 page written per day, 1 project milestone completed, 1 hour of practice logged daily. You're not trying to be perfect, you're trying to be undeniable. And here's the key: you keep the proof standard small enough that you can't realistically avoid it, but real enough that it changes your identity. Because identity is not what you say you are. Identity is what you do repeatedly. Quiet avoidance keeps your identity in the imagination. Proof moves it into reality. So I want you to run a simple check at the end of every week, like a scientist, not like a judge. Ask, what proof did I produce this week? What changed because of my actions? And if the answer is nothing, don't panic. Don't spiral. Just remove the story and return to the smallest possible action that creates evidence. 1 arena, 1 proof standard, 1 week. Because the goal isn't to be impressive. The goal is to become real. And here's the question that matters at the end of point 2, and I want you to be brave enough to answer it honestly. What are you calling progress right now that is actually just preparation? What's the thing you keep learning about, thinking about, planning for, but not doing? And if you had to prove it with receipts by next Sunday, what would you do differently starting today? Point 3 is where we take the romance out of it, because a lot of people love the idea of moving in silence, but the moment you ask them for proof, the conversation gets slippery. They start talking about how they feel, how motivated they were, how hard the week was, how much they wanted it. And I get it. Feelings are real, life is real, but feelings are not evidence. If you build your life on mood, your life will be as stable as your mood. And that's not a life, that's a weather report. So when I say build real proof, I mean something very specific. Proof is measurable, not emotional. Proof is the part of your progress that exists even when your confidence disappears. Proof is what remains when you strip away the story. It's the thing you can point at privately and say, this happened, this moved, this changed. Because here's the quiet truth. Your mind can argue with your feelings forever. You can feel like you're improving and still be stuck. You can feel like you're failing and still be growing. That's why the Stoics were so serious about separating what's happening from the story we wrap around it. Epictetus keeps coming back to this idea that the world doesn't break you. Your interpretation breaks you. And the same is true in reverse. Your interpretation can also flatter you. It can convince you you're on the way while you're still at the same starting line. Proof is how you stay honest without becoming harsh. Now think about the kinds of proof people accidentally choose. They pick proof that's dramatic, expensive, or complicated. They try to turn their transformation into a movie. New routine, new schedule, new gear, new app, new everything. And then when life punches them in the mouth on a random Wednesday, the whole system collapses because it was designed for a perfect life they don't actually live. Real proof is almost boring. It's simple, it's repeatable, it's trackable, and it respects reality. If your arena is your body, proof is not "I'm being healthier." Proof is sessions completed, steps walked, weight lifted, a consistent bedtime, a waist measurement that changed, a resting heart rate that improved, something that doesn't care how inspired you felt. If your arena is money, proof is not "I'm becoming smarter with finances." Proof is debt reduced, savings increased, spending tracked, an extra income stream started, a budget you actually followed on a messy week, numbers that move. If your arena is skill, proof is not "I'm learning." Proof is output, a finished piece, a project shipped, a portfolio that exists, hours of practice logged that you can't rationalize away, something the world could see even if you never show it. And what I love about this is the psychological relief it creates. When proof becomes the standard, you stop needing to constantly ask yourself, "Am I doing enough?" Because you can see what you did. You stop needing external reassurance because you can feel the internal stability of facts. You stop living in the anxiety of guesswork. Proof is calm. Now here's the part that separates people who change from people who stay in self-improvement forever. You don't just want proof, you define it. You name it. You choose what counts. Because if you don't define proof, your mind will choose the easiest version of it. The version that lets you feel good without doing much. So you need a definition that's honest. There are two kinds of metrics you can use, and this is where most people waste time without knowing why. There are outcome metrics and there are process metrics. Outcome metrics are things like weight loss, income, followers, big results. They matter, but they move slowly. Process metrics are the daily actions that create outcomes: workouts completed, pages written, hours practiced, dollars saved, applications sent. These are the ones you can control today. These are the ones that make you dangerous. So if you want to build real proof quietly, you anchor yourself to process proof, and you let outcome proof lag behind like a shadow. That's not just motivational, that's sane. This is also why I keep saying no announcements. When you announce outcomes, you create impatience. You start craving proof in the form of applause. But when you commit to process proof, you start craving the only kind of validation that can't be taken from you, your own integrity, the simple knowledge that you did what you said you'd do. And I want to make this practical in a way that doesn't turn your life into a spreadsheet. The cleanest approach is a private scoreboard that tracks 1 or 2 process proofs and a weekly check-in that looks only for evidence, not perfection. Evidence. Did you produce proof most days? Did you return quickly after a miss? Did your actions match the identity you're trying to build? Notice what that does. It removes drama. It removes self-hate. It removes the new me fantasy. You're not reborn in a day. You're built quietly, repeatedly, and the scoreboard becomes a mirror, never insulting, never flattering, just honest. Seneca wrote about how time is the one thing we treat like it's infinite until it's not. Proof is how you stop leaking your days, because when you track proof, you start seeing the pattern of your life. You see where you're consistent. You see where you disappear. You see which habits are real and which ones are just good intentions. And that awareness, by itself, is a form of power. So if you've been stuck in mood, here's the shift to live by. Stop asking, "Do I feel like I'm improving?" And start asking, "What evidence did I create?" Evidence turns ambition into reality. Evidence turns silence into strategy. Evidence turns self-respect into something you can actually stand on when life gets loud. And now a question you should answer honestly, because your next step depends on it. If someone couldn't hear your intentions, couldn't hear your plans, couldn't hear your explanations, if they could only see your receipts, what would your life currently prove about you? Point 4 is where we stop pretending your life can be rebuilt in 10 directions at once. Because the most common reason people don't have proof isn't that they're lazy. It's that they're scattered. They're trying to fix everything simultaneously: body, money, relationships, confidence, discipline, career, sleep, mindset, and they wonder why nothing is moving. But nothing moves because focus isn't just attention. Focus is sacrifice. Focus is choosing what you will not chase right now so one thing can actually grow. So point 4 is simple. Choose one arena that changes everything. I want you to imagine you're standing in the middle of a room with 10 doors. Every door says new life. One door leads to fitness, one to money, one to a skill, one to relationships, one to discipline. And you keep opening doors, peeking inside, stepping halfway in, stepping back out, opening another one, and by the end of the day you're exhausted, but you're still in the same room. That's what most people call self-improvement. It's movement without relocation, activity without arrival. The reason one arena matters is because life is connected. When you genuinely improve one domain, the others shift as a side effect. When your body becomes stronger, your mood improves, your self-respect rises, your sleep stabilizes, your confidence gets quieter and more real. When your finances become stable, your anxiety drops, your decisions get cleaner, your boundaries get stronger because you're not desperate. When you build a skill and produce output, your identity changes, because now you're someone who finishes, not someone who dreams. One arena, taken seriously, becomes a lever that lifts the rest of your life. The Stoics understood this through a different language. They didn't talk about having it all. They talked about character, about the core. If the core is strong, the rest becomes manageable. If the core is weak, everything feels heavy. And in your modern life, one arena is how you strengthen the core, not by thinking about it, by building proof inside one domain until it becomes undeniable. Now, let me tell you something that might feel uncomfortable, but it will set you free. Most people want multiple arenas because they're afraid to choose wrong. They want options because options feel safe. But options are also how you stay half-committed forever. When you keep 5 arenas open, you always have an excuse to quit the hard one. I'm still working on the others. This is why choosing one arena feels like pressure, because it removes the escape hatch. And that pressure is exactly what makes you grow. So how do you choose the one arena without overthinking it? Don't choose the thing that sounds impressive. Choose the thing that is currently draining your life the most. The area that, if improved, would make the rest of your days lighter. For some people, it's sleep. Because without sleep, everything becomes a negotiation. For others, it's money, because financial chaos poisons every decision. For others, it's the body, because they've lost their energy, and without energy, their mind becomes weak. For others, it's a skill, because they need competence to build real confidence. The right arena isn't the one that looks good, it's the one that fixes the leak. And here's another way to choose it, because sometimes you don't know what the biggest leak is. Ask yourself, what do I avoid most consistently? What do I keep promising to handle soon? That's usually the arena. Because avoidance is rarely random. Avoidance is a signal. It's the mind saying, this is the place where your identity is fragile, and that's exactly where proof will change you. Now we make it practical. Once you choose the arena, you choose the proof. You define what counts as progress in that arena for the next 30 to 90 days. Not in a dramatic way, in a measurable way. If the arena is your body, your proof might be 4 training sessions per week and a daily walk. If the arena is money, your proof might be tracking spending daily and saving a fixed amount weekly. If the arena is skill, your proof might be 1 hour of practice daily and one finished output every week. If the arena is discipline, your proof might be a fixed wake time and a screens-off boundary at night. Simple, repeatable, honest. And then you do one more thing that makes the whole system work. You stop treating the arena like a mood. You treat it like an appointment, the same way you wouldn't feel like paying rent, but you still pay it. You stop waiting to feel ready. You do the proof action because you decided. Decision first, emotion later. And I want you to hear this clearly because it's the motivational heart of this point. When you choose one arena, you stop living like your life is a debate. You stop negotiating with yourself all day. You stop waking up and asking, what should I do? Because you already chose the arena. Your day becomes simpler. And simplicity is not a downgrade. Simplicity is power. Because complexity is how the mind escapes. So here's the question that closes point 4, and it's meant to be answered with courage, not comfort. If you could only win in one area over the next 60 days, which win would change the rest of your life the most? And are you willing to choose it quietly, without telling anyone, without performing it, without keeping backup options, and to let the proof be your only explanation? Point 5 is where we make this real in your hands, because up to now it can still sound like a philosophy. And philosophy is beautiful, but if it doesn't change your Tuesday, it's just entertainment. So point 5 is the tool that turns move in silence into a measurable system. Build a private scoreboard, something so simple and so honest that you can't trick yourself, because your biggest enemy here isn't other people. It's your own ability to rationalize. The mind is creative. It can turn one good day into a story of I'm back. It can turn one bad day into a story of I'm failing. It can turn planning into progress and exhaustion into destiny. And that's why you need a scoreboard. Not to punish yourself, to ground yourself, to stop living in narrative and start living in evidence. A private scoreboard is exactly what it sounds like, a tiny system you can check in under 30 seconds that tells you if you produced proof. It's private, so you don't turn it into performance. It's simple, so you don't abandon it. And it's consistent, so it becomes a mirror, never flattering, never cruel, just honest. Here's the mistake people make. They try to build a perfect tracker. They download apps. They create categories. They design dashboards. They turn their life into a project management board. And then they quit because the tracker becomes another task. That's not a scoreboard. That's a distraction wearing productivity clothes. The scoreboard you want is minimal. One arena, 1 or 2 proof actions. A visible way to mark completion. That's it. If your arena is the body, your scoreboard might be 2 lines, movement and sleep. Movement could be a workout or a walk, whatever your proof is. Sleep could be lights out by a certain time or a consistent wake time. If your arena is money, your scoreboard could be track spending and save. If your arena is a skill, it could be practice and output. You're not tracking your entire existence. You're tracking the few actions that create the identity you want. And the real power is not the tracking itself. It's what tracking does to your mind. The moment you have a scoreboard, the day stops being a conversation. You stop negotiating with yourself in vague language. You stop saying, I'll do it later, because later is not a plan. The scoreboard turns the day into a simple question. Did you produce proof? Yes or no? That sounds almost too basic, but that's exactly why it works. Discipline is not complicated. It's uncomfortable simplicity. Most people avoid it because they're addicted to complexity. Complexity gives you hope without commitment. Simplicity forces you to face yourself. Now let's make it concrete. The cleanest scoreboard looks like a 7-day grid, 7 boxes, 1 week. Every day you either earned the mark or you didn't. If you did the proof action, you mark it. If you didn't, you leave it blank. No guilt notes, no long explanations, because the moment you start explaining, you're back in the story. The scoreboard is not a diary, it's a receipt. And here's where the motivational part becomes real and almost shocking. When you collect receipts, confidence stops being something you beg for. It becomes something you build, quietly, day by day. Because self-trust is nothing more than evidence that you keep promises, especially small ones. That's it. There's no magic. There's no secret. There's just the reality of your own consistency. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the kind of mind that stays steady, not because life is easy, but because the person has trained themselves to do what needs doing. That training isn't grand. It's daily. It's repetitive. It's almost humble. And the scoreboard is your humble training ground. It's you saying, I don't need a perfect week. I need a real week. Now, the most important part of the scoreboard is what you do when you miss. Because you will miss. If you build a system that assumes you'll be flawless, you're building a fantasy. The scoreboard is not there to prove you're perfect. It's there to prove you return. That's the true marker of strength. Not never falling off, but returning quickly without drama. So here's a rule that will change your entire year. If you live it, never miss twice. Miss once, fine. Life happens. You're human. But the second miss is where the identity shifts. The second miss is where your brain starts writing a new story. This isn't who I am. So the scoreboard exists to catch that second miss. It's an early warning system. And to keep it grounded, set a weekly proof threshold. Not every day. That's for robots and for people who burn out. Set a threshold like 5 out of 7 or 4 out of 7, something that respects reality while still demanding integrity. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're trying to build a pattern that holds under pressure. Now let me make it painfully practical so you can apply it tonight. Pick one place to keep the scoreboard where you will actually see it. Your phone notes, a calendar, a paper on your wall, a small notebook by your bed. Then choose one proof action for tomorrow that takes less than 20 minutes, something you can do even if the day collapses. Then, at the end of tomorrow, you mark the box. That's the whole system. It's almost insultingly simple. And that's why it wins. Because once you have a private scoreboard, something changes. You stop needing to tell people what you're doing. You stop craving applause. You stop seeking permission. Your progress becomes quiet, but it becomes real. And real progress has a strange effect. It makes you calmer around noise because you're not defending an idea anymore. You're building a fact. So, here's the question that ends point 5. And I want you to answer it like you mean it. If your life needed one honest scoreboard, one tiny mirror that tells the truth, what would it track? And are you willing to keep it private, not because you're hiding, but because you're finally done performing? Point 6 is where we take the scoreboard and give it a heartbeat, because tracking alone doesn't change a life. Execution does. The scoreboard is the mirror, but you still need a ritual that creates proof, even on days when your mind tries to bargain. And this is the turning point in the whole episode, because once you have a daily proof ritual, you stop being the kind of person who needs motivation. You become the kind of person who has standards. So point 6 is simple. Build one daily proof ritual, small, non-negotiable output. Most people think transformation requires big effort. It doesn't. It requires consistent effort. Big effort is exciting, but it's unreliable. It depends on mood, time, energy, perfect mornings, and the fantasy version of your life. Consistent effort is quiet, almost boring, and it's unstoppable. This is why the strongest people aren't the ones who go hard once. They're the ones who show up in small ways, even when it feels ordinary. And the daily proof ritual is how you build that. It's one action you do almost every day that produces a measurable footprint. Not a feeling, not an intention, a footprint. Now the key is that the ritual has to be designed for reality, not for your best self. It has to survive tired days, messy schedules, bad moods, and unexpected stress. If your ritual only works when the day is perfect, it's not a ritual, it's a wish. So here's the rule: make it small enough that you can do it on your worst day, but real enough that it moves the needle over time. If your arena is your body, the ritual might be 20 minutes of movement, walk, push, pull, squat, stretch, something that keeps your body in the game. If your arena is money, it might be 5 minutes of tracking plus one small financial action. Move a set amount to savings, pay something down, cut one expense. If your arena is a skill, it might be 1 hour of practice or even 30 minutes if your life is chaotic. But with one requirement: you create output, one paragraph, one page, one rep, one recording, one deliverable, something that exists outside your head. Because there's a massive difference between "I worked on it" and "I produced something." Worked on it is fog, produce something is proof. And this is where the motivational piece becomes very tangible. When you produce daily proof, you build a relationship with yourself that is hard to describe, but easy to feel. You start trusting your own word. You stop viewing yourself as a person who needs to be pushed. You start viewing yourself as a person who follows through. That shift is not loud, but it changes everything. It changes how you walk, how you speak, how you make decisions, how you handle disrespect, how you handle temptation, how you handle stress, because deep down, you know you don't fold easily anymore. The Stoics would call that internal authority, not control over the world, but control over the self. And it's not created by reading quotes, it's created by repetition, by daily proof. Epictetus used to tell his students not to just talk about philosophy, but to train it like an athlete trains the body, under pressure, consistently. The daily ritual is your training. Now, you might be thinking, but what if I miss? Good. That means you're dealing with reality. The ritual isn't about never missing. It's about making the default, "I do something." And when you miss, you don't go emotional. You go mechanical, you return. That's the whole secret. Most people don't fail because they miss one day. They fail because they turn one miss into a story about who they are. The daily ritual prevents that story from taking over. And to make this even stronger, you attach the ritual to a trigger you already have. Something that happens every day no matter what. After coffee, after brushing your teeth, after you get home, before you shower, before you eat dinner. You don't rely on willpower to remember. You attach it to a routine so it becomes automatic. This is how you make discipline feel natural instead of violent. So here's what I want you to do with point 6, quietly, without drama. Choose your daily proof ritual. Choose the smallest version that you can commit to without negotiating. Then define what done means in one sentence. For example, done means 20 minutes of walking. Done means 1 page written. Done means 5 minutes of tracking and 1 transfer. Define done so clearly that your mind can't twist it. And then the most important part, treat it like rent. Rent is not a mood. Rent is not a debate. Rent is due. Your daily proof ritual is due, not because life is cruel, but because your future depends on it. This is what separates people who change from people who stay inspired. The people who change pay their ritual like rent. Now here's the question that closes point 6, and it's a serious one. What is the smallest daily proof you could do for the next 7 days that would make you respect yourself again? Not hypothetically, realistically. And if you knew nobody would clap, nobody would notice, and nobody would reward you, would you still do it, just to become someone you can trust? Point 7 is where we stop acting like this is only a mindset game, because if your environment is built to seduce your worst habits, then your discipline will keep getting humbled, and you'll keep calling it a personality flaw when it's really a design flaw. You can have the cleanest intentions in the world and still lose, simply because quitting is easier than continuing. And if quitting is easy, you will eventually quit. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, but one stressful day will arrive and your life will follow the path of least resistance like water. So this point is about removing the negotiation by making it hard to quit and easy to start, not with motivation, with structure. Because notice what happens right after you build a daily proof ritual. At first it feels strong, it feels clean, you feel proud. But then real life shows up: bad sleep, a long day, a random argument, a heavy mood, a family situation, an unexpected bill, and suddenly the ritual becomes a debate. You start bargaining. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll make up for it later. I deserve a break. And the dangerous thing is that these bargains don't sound evil. They sound reasonable. They sound compassionate. They sound intelligent. And that's why they work on you. The Stoics were obsessed with this idea. Your mind will rationalize anything if you let it. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reminders because he knew his own mind could drift. He didn't write to sound wise, he wrote to stay steady, and what we're doing here is the same thing, but with environment instead of journals. We're building reminders into your life so you don't have to win a debate every day. Here's the core truth: the environment is a vote. Every object around you is either voting for your future or voting for your past. And most people live in an environment that votes against them all day long. Phone in the bed, junk food in the kitchen, TV remote on the couch, distractions one tap away, notifications designed by people who profit from your weakness. Then they wonder why their standards collapse at night. It's because the room is pushing them downhill. So what does it mean to make it hard to quit? It means you remove the easy exits. You create friction for the habits that ruin you, and you create smooth entry for the habits that build you. And you don't do this because you're weak. You do it because you're realistic. You're not trying to be a saint. You're trying to be consistent. Start with the first and simplest move. Remove the triggers that start the negotiation. If scrolling at night destroys your sleep, the answer isn't be stronger. The answer is the phone doesn't live in the bed anymore. Period. Charge it across the room. Better yet, outside the room. Because if the trigger is not present, the negotiation doesn't start. If snacks are your escape when you're stressed, the answer isn't have more willpower. The answer is stop stocking the exact thing that hijacks you. Don't create a nightly battle you don't need. This is not deprivation. This is leadership. Now do the opposite for your proof ritual. Remove friction from the start. Make the beginning stupidly easy. If you want to train in the morning, your shoes and clothes are ready the night before. Not as a cute productivity hack, but as a psychological decision. You are eliminating the moment where you can talk yourself out of it. If you want to write, your document is open, your laptop is charged, your first sentence is waiting. If you want to practice a skill, the instrument is visible, not hidden in a case under a bed. You want the environment to whisper, start, not ask, do you really want to? Because here's what people miss. The hardest part is not the work. The hardest part is starting. Starting is where the ego fights. Starting is where the brain produces excuses. So design your life to make starting automatic. And then we go one layer deeper, because some of the most destructive quitting doesn't happen physically. It happens socially. It happens when you keep easy access to people who drain you, distract you, or pull you back into the version of you that talks more than he builds. That's why moving in silence is not just about not posting, it's about not inviting constant commentary into your process. If every time you see certain people you end up explaining yourself, defending your goals, or slipping into old routines, you don't need a confrontation. You need boundaries that reduce contact with the friction. This is where your silence becomes mature, not bitter, not performative, just clean. You don't need to announce you're changing, you just change your inputs. You don't need to argue, you just adjust access. Musonius Rufus, one of the Stoic teachers, spoke often about training the soul the way you train the body, through habits that make virtue easier and vice harder. He wasn't saying avoid the world. He was saying, stop placing yourself in situations where you predictably fail and then acting surprised. That's wisdom. That's humility. That's strategy. Now here's the most practical part of point 7, and I want you to imagine doing it today without turning it into a big project. Pick one quit switch you're going to install this week. 1. A quit switch is a rule that blocks your most common exit. If you always quit at night, your quit switch might be a screens off time and the charger lives outside your bedroom. If you always quit when you get home, your quit switch might be that you do your proof ritual before you sit down. If you always quit when you feel overwhelmed, your quit switch might be reducing your daily ritual to the minimum version instead of skipping it. The point is to cut off the path that leads to, I'll do it later, because later is where your goals go to die. And then create one start ramp, one thing that makes beginning so easy it almost feels silly. A start ramp could be a 5-minute version of the ritual that you can always do, because the secret is this: consistency is often just refusing to have a 0 day. You can have light days, you can have imperfect days, but 0 is what breaks identity. 0 is what reopens the negotiation tomorrow. So let me make it visceral. You are building proof. Proof is fragile early on. It needs protection. And protection looks like design. You're not relying on heroic discipline. You're building a world where discipline is the default. And now I want to ask you a question that's uncomfortable in the right way, because it exposes the real enemy. If your life were honest, where is the easiest exit you keep using? What's the one place your environment makes quitting effortless? Your phone, your bed, your friends, your kitchen, your evenings, your mornings. And what is one small change you could make tonight that would make quitting just annoying enough that you'd choose the proof ritual instead? Because when you make it hard to quit, you don't just improve your habits, you change your identity. You become the kind of person who doesn't rely on motivation, you rely on structure. And once structure is in place, the next step becomes almost inevitable, because now we need to talk about the social side of this. How to stop explaining yourself, how to stop negotiating your goals out loud, and how to protect your momentum from other people's opinions without becoming cold. Point 8 is where we deal with the part nobody wants to admit. Sometimes the biggest threat to your proof isn't your laziness, it's your mouth. It's the urge to explain, to justify, to defend, to narrate your mission while it's still fragile. Because explaining feels like control, it feels like maturity, it feels like you're clearing misunderstandings. But most of the time, it's not maturity, it's anxiety trying to feel safe. And if you want to move in silence and build real proof, you have to stop bleeding momentum through unnecessary conversations. You have to stop turning your goals into debates. Here's the reality. When you explain yourself to someone who doesn't truly support the mission, you do two damaging things at once. First, you invite opinions into a process that requires consistency, not commentary. Second, you teach your brain that your decisions need approval, and once your brain gets used to approval, it starts bargaining when it doesn't get it. That's how self-trust erodes, one small justification at a time. The Stoics had an almost harsh relationship with approval for a reason. They understood that if your peace depends on other people agreeing with you, you will never be free. Epictetus would say it in his own way. You can't hand the steering wheel of your mind to strangers and then complain about where you end up. If you want to own your life, you have to own your decisions, even when they're misunderstood. But let's make this practical, because you don't need a philosophy lecture. You need a way to speak that protects your momentum. There are two kinds of conversations you should stop having immediately. The first is the permission conversation. It sounds like, do you think I should do this? Is this realistic? Is this a good idea? And yes, advice can be useful, but if you ask 10 people, you'll get 10 fears. Most people don't give advice from wisdom. They give advice from their own limitations. They project their comfort zone onto your future. So if you're serious about building proof, you only ask advice from people who have done what you're trying to do, or people who genuinely want your growth more than your comfort. Everyone else gets a polite smile and a private decision. The second is the status update conversation, the one where you keep telling people what you're working on, how you're changing, what your plan is, what you're about to do. This is the conversation that gives you emotional reward without requiring proof. It's the same trap we talked about earlier, but now it's social. You get to feel like you're moving because you're talking about movement. But talking is not moving. Talking is talking. So what replaces all that? Short, calm, final answers. Not rude, not dramatic. Just finished. You don't owe a full explanation for why you're sleeping earlier. You don't owe an essay for why you're training more. You don't owe a debate for why you're saying no to parties, alcohol, or distractions. You can give a clean sentence and move on. I'm working on some things. I'm keeping it simple this year. I'm focused right now. I'm not available for that. Maybe another time. And then you stop. No extra details, no justifications, no defending, because the more you explain, the more you invite negotiation. And the moment you negotiate, you teach people that your boundaries are flexible. Now, I want you to notice something important. This isn't just about other people, it's about your relationship with yourself. Every time you explain too much, you're also trying to convince yourself. You're trying to reduce the discomfort of discipline by collecting external approval, but discipline is uncomfortable by nature. The moment you accept that discomfort without needing applause, you become stronger. Marcus Aurelius wrote about not being dependent on praise, not because praise is evil, but because dependency is weakness, and you can feel this in daily life. The person who needs praise becomes reactive. The person who doesn't become steady. Steady is what creates proof. So here's the practical move for point 8, and it's one of the most powerful things you can do in 2026. Create a speech limit for your goals, meaning you stop talking about what you're going to do, and you only talk about what you have already done, not as arrogance, as protection. If someone asks what you're working on, you don't reveal the fragile plan. You reveal the completed proof, or you reveal nothing and keep building. And if you have to speak, you keep it clean and brief. You don't narrate the entire journey. You give the headline and keep your life private. Because privacy isn't secrecy. Privacy is dignity. Privacy is you choosing to build before you speak. Now, there's a deeper layer to this, and it's worth mentioning because it will save you a lot of unnecessary pain. Some people don't hate you. They just can't understand the version of you that's changing. They're used to you being available, explainable, predictable. When you start moving differently, it makes them uncomfortable, and discomfort makes people ask questions. They push for details. They pull you into conversations. Not always out of malice, sometimes out of habit. But the effect is the same. Your focus gets diluted. So you handle it with calm repetition. You become boring in the best way. You don't argue. You don't persuade. You don't try to be understood by people who aren't walking your path. You keep your answer simple and you return to your work. That's what move in silence looks like socially. You become unreactive. And here's the closing question for point 8, because if you answer it honestly, your whole year gets easier. Where are you still over-explaining? Who are you still trying to convince? And what would change if, for the next 7 days, you replaced explanations with action? If you let your proof do the talking and kept your mouth closed long enough for your life to actually change? Point 9 is where we flip the emotional script, because even if you do everything right, choose one arena, track proof, build a daily ritual, design your environment, stop over-explaining, there's still one moment that will test you harder than any habit. The moment you realize nobody is watching, no applause, no proud of you, no one checking in, no one noticing you've changed your schedule, cleaned up your diet, stopped going out, stopped scrolling, started working. And for a lot of people, that's where the old self tries to come back. Because the ego wants witnesses. The ego wants a stage. The ego wants proof in the form of attention. So point 9 is the quiet advantage. No one sees it is not a disadvantage, it's the edge. Because when nobody is watching, you're free. You're free to be messy, free to start slow, free to be a beginner without embarrassment, free to fail privately, adjust and continue. You're free to build without performance pressure. And performance pressure is one of the biggest killers of long-term discipline. It turns growth into a show. It makes you choose what looks impressive over what actually works. It makes you avoid the ugly early phase where you're inconsistent, awkward and learning. In other words, when nobody is watching, you can finally be honest. This is why so many people prefer the fantasy of transformation to the reality of it. Reality is quiet, it's repetitive, it's lonely sometimes. It's you doing the same small action again while the world keeps moving like nothing changed. That's not glamorous. But it's exactly how real strength is built. The quiet phase is the price of real proof. The Stoics were built for this. They didn't train their character for applause, they trained it for integrity. There's a line often attributed to Epictetus that captures the spirit, even if people hear it in different forms. You become what you practice, not what you announce, not what you intend, what you practice. And practice is usually invisible. It's private, it's inconvenient, it's the daily choice to act like the person you want to become before you feel like him. Now, let me bring this down to daily life, because this point hits hardest in the evenings. The moment you're alone, the moment you could easily skip the ritual and nobody would know. The moment you could order the unhealthy meal and nobody would see. The moment you could scroll for 2 hours and nobody would call you out. That's where identity is chosen, not in public, in private. And most people never build proof because they build for witnesses. Their discipline is social. They show up when people can see them. They behave when someone is expecting it. They work when the mood is exciting. But the moment the lights go off, so do the standards. That's not because they're bad. It's because they haven't learned the skill of private pride, the ability to respect yourself without external reward. So how do you build private pride? You stop asking, will anyone notice? And you start asking, will I notice? Because you do notice. You notice when you betray yourself. You notice when you keep promises. You notice when you choose comfort over character. Even if you pretend you don't, your nervous system keeps the score. That's why some people feel anxious for no clear reason. They're living with quiet self-disappointment. And the reverse is also true. When you keep small promises privately, you feel a calm that doesn't need explanation. You feel anchored. You feel clean. So point 9 is about switching the reward system. Instead of needing applause, you learn to crave alignment. You learn to crave the feeling of waking up and knowing you didn't negotiate with your standards. And that craving becomes addictive in a healthy way. It makes you consistent. Now here's a real practical way to use the no one sees it advantage without turning it into a motivational slogan. You create what I call a private win, one small action every day that nobody knows about, but that you know is building you. It could be your daily proof ritual. It could be a walk. It could be reading 10 pages. It could be saving money. It could be practicing a skill. The key is that it's invisible. It's yours. It's an act of self-respect that doesn't ask for permission. And there's a psychological reason this works. When you do something good without witnesses, you're telling your brain, I'm not doing this for image. You're telling yourself, I'm real. That's how identity becomes stable. It stops depending on mood, attention, and social feedback. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations in private. He wasn't performing. He wasn't building a brand. He was training his mind because he knew power without discipline becomes chaos. He was the emperor of Rome, and yet his real battle was still inside his own head. That's the lesson. If he needed private training, you do too. Not because you're weak, because you're human. And there's another advantage to nobody watching. You move faster because you're not protecting an image. You're not afraid of looking like a beginner. You're not afraid of making changes. You don't have to announce a new identity and then defend it. You can just build quietly until the identity becomes obvious. So if you've been feeling alone in your improvement, if you've been thinking, why does nobody care? I want you to flip that thought today. Nobody caring can be your advantage. Nobody watching is freedom. It's a clean training ground. Here's the question that closes point 9, and it's the one that separates the performer from the builder. If no one ever praised you for your discipline, if nobody ever noticed your progress, would you still do it simply because you refuse to live a life you don't respect? And what is one private win you can commit to today that will make you quietly proud of yourself tonight? Point 10 is the final test, because everything we've talked about so far can still live in a clean, controlled world. Good mornings, calm weeks, predictable schedules, a stable mood. But your real life isn't going to stay clean. Your real life is going to apply pressure. You'll have nights where you barely sleep. Days where work hits you from 3 directions, moments where someone disappoints you, or you disappoint yourself, weeks where progress feels invisible. And in those moments, the question isn't whether you understand the system. The question is whether the system survives you. This is where most people lose their proof, not because they don't know what to do, but because the first hard week makes them emotional. They start interpreting setbacks like a verdict. One miss becomes, I'm falling off. One bad day becomes, I'm back to my old self. And the moment you turn a normal dip into a personal identity story, you don't just slow down, you collapse. Because now you're not fighting for a habit anymore. You're fighting your own self-image, and that's heavy. So, point 10 is about pressure tests. Proof under stress, and how to return without drama. The Stoics were almost obsessed with this. You don't really know your character until life presses on it. Anyone can be disciplined when it's convenient. Anyone can be calm when nothing is happening. But the moment life becomes unfair, noisy, exhausting, unpredictable, that's when your standards either become real or they reveal themselves as a performance. Marcus Aurelius had a line that captures the spirit of this. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The point isn't to romanticize suffering. It's to understand that resistance is not a sign you should stop. Resistance is the place where the skill is trained. So let's make this practical. A pressure test is not something you seek. It's something you expect. It's the moment when your mind offers you a deal. Skip today, and I'll let you feel better. That deal is always a lie. It feels good for an hour, and then it costs you self-trust for a week. And that's why we need a protocol. A simple way to respond when pressure hits, so you don't have to invent discipline in the moment. Here's the protocol. When life gets hard, you don't raise the standard. You lower the ritual to the minimum version and you keep the streak alive. This is the part people misunderstand. They think discipline means pushing harder under stress. Sometimes, yes, but most of the time, the smarter move is to protect continuity. You don't need an impressive day. You need a non-zero day. You need a day that keeps your identity intact. Because identity is built on repeated evidence, and the most important evidence is what you do when you don't feel like it. So you create a minimum proof version of your daily ritual and you treat it like emergency power. When the full ritual is too heavy, you switch to minimum proof without shame. If your normal ritual is a full workout, minimum proof might be 10 minutes of movement. If your normal ritual is an hour of skill practice, minimum proof might be 15 minutes of output. If your normal ritual is a full financial routine, minimum proof might be 5 minutes of tracking and one clean decision. The point is not to win the day. The point is to refuse to become the person who disappears under pressure. And here's why this is so powerful. It teaches your nervous system that stress does not control you. It teaches your mind that discomfort is not an emergency. It teaches your identity that you don't collapse when life gets loud. That lesson is worth more than any perfect week. Now, the second part of the pressure test is what you do after a miss, because misses will happen, not because you're undisciplined, but because you're human. Travel happens, illness happens, family emergencies happen, mental fatigue happens. The danger is not the miss. The danger is the meaning you attach to it. So when you miss, you follow one rule. You don't explain it, you don't punish it, and you don't expand it. You return. Quickly, cleanly, quietly. No long speeches, no guilt, no starting over Monday. Starting over is a dramatic fantasy. Returning is a disciplined reality. Returning is the skill that actually changes your life. And to make returning automatic, you need a very specific reset move that you can do the next day without thinking. One action that reestablishes the identity. For some people it's a walk. For others, it's cleaning up one meal. For others, it's sitting down and producing one piece of output. For others, it's going to bed on time. Your reset move should be so simple you can do it even if you feel disappointed in yourself. Because disappointment is exactly when you're most tempted to quit. This is also where the private scoreboard becomes a weapon, not because it shames you, but because it tells the truth without drama. It shows you patterns. It shows you how quickly you return. And the speed of your return is the real definition of resilience. So, let's take it one step deeper. Because this point is not just about staying consistent. It's about becoming emotionally unbreakable in a practical way. A lot of people don't fear hard work. They fear the feeling of being behind. They fear the feeling of being small. They fear the feeling that it's taking too long, and that fear pushes them into two extremes. Either they sprint and burn out, or they stop and pretend they're resting. Both extremes are driven by the same impatience. Pressure tests teach patience. They teach you that real change is built with calm repetition. They teach you to stay steady when the progress isn't loud yet. They teach you to keep paying the daily rent, even when the landlord doesn't applaud you. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Under pressure, your imagination will create a story that the setback is bigger than it is, that the delay means you're failing, that one bad week means it's over. Pressure tests are how you stop believing those stories. You learn to see a bad week as weather, not as fate. So here's the final practical standard that closes this whole episode, and it's the kind of standard that actually changes a year. Your goal is not perfection. Your goal is proof that survives stress. Proof that still happens on tired days. Proof that still happens when nobody cares. Proof that still happens when life is messy. And here's the question I want you to carry with you after point 10, because it's a question that separates the people who transform from the people who keep restarting. When the next hard week hits, and it will, what is your minimum proof? What is the smallest action you will do no matter what, so that your identity stays intact? And if you've been waiting for life to get easier before you become consistent, what if consistency is the thing that finally makes life easier? If you really think about what we just built, it's not a motivational idea. It's a quiet system for becoming undeniable. Because move in silence isn't the goal, it's the container. The goal is proof. Proof that exists outside your mood, outside other people's opinions, outside the random chaos of a hard week. Proof you can measure. Proof you can feel in the way you carry yourself. Proof that makes you calmer, because you're not asking the world to believe in you anymore. You're watching yourself become real. And maybe the deepest shift here is this. You stop treating your life like a conversation. You stop negotiating. You stop explaining. You stop hoping you'll feel different one day. You pick one arena. You define what counts as proof. You keep a private scoreboard that tells the truth without drama. You build a daily ritual that produces a footprint even on your worst days. You design your environment so quitting becomes inconvenient. You speak less. Not because you're cold, but because you're committed. You stop craving witnesses, because you learn to respect yourself in private. And when pressure arrives, as it always does, you don't collapse into a story. You return, quickly, cleanly, quietly. That's how people actually change, not by becoming a new person overnight, but by becoming a person who keeps promises when nobody is watching. So here's what I want you to do after this ends, and keep it simple, almost embarrassingly simple. Choose your minimum proof for tomorrow, the smallest action that still counts, the action you will do even if the day goes wrong. Then, at the end of the day, mark it. Just one mark, one receipt. Because a week from now, you won't remember how inspired you felt, you'll remember what you did. And that's the beginning of self-trust. And if you ever feel the urge to announce it, to post it, to talk about it, use that urge as your signal. Don't speak. Produce. Let the proof be the only language. If this episode gave you something real to hold on to, take it with you quietly and keep building. And when you're ready, listen to another episode from the channel and keep stacking proof, because your future isn't built in big moments. It's built in small decisions you repeat until they become you.